There's a peculiar truth nestled deep down that many choose to ignore. Some kids never truly experience the joys of childhood. They become adept at tiptoeing around tense situations, learning early on to soothe those who should be their protectors instead. Crying, forget it. It only brings labels of weakness, and in a world that demands unyielding strength, those children become steeled against their emotions even before they can grasp what strong even means. If you've ever found yourself growing up a tad too quickly, this rings an all too familiar bell. It's woven into the fabric of how you overly apologize for things you didn't even do, the way you hesitate before speaking, constantly checking if your words will upset the delicate balance around you. It's that moment when laughter fades, and suddenly you're shouldering invisible burdens. It's as if a switch flips, taking you from carefree giggles to becoming the rock everyone leans on without asking for a single ounce of support in return. Hey everyone, welcome to Psychologist Jeep, the quiet corner of the internet for those who had to grow up a little too soon. You know who you are, the ones who learned to stay strong when they really just wanted to be held, who became the responsible one before they even turned 10. Here, we don't judge that version of you. We understand it. We'll talk, reflect, and maybe even laugh at how heavy hearts can still keep beating beautifully. Before we begin, hit like, share this with someone who understands, and drop a comment. Tell us where you're listening from, or what growing up too fast meant for you. The first lightbulb moment comes when you figure out that no knight in shining armor will be crashing through the door to save the day. It's an awkward transformation into your own guardian, trying to shield yourself while simultaneously patching up your family members' emotional wounds. Initially, it's just little acts of kindness, but soon, this playful persona begins to morph into a role that feels uncannily permanent. What started as survival maneuvers conveniently disguises itself as wisdom and maturity, leaving you with a deep ache masked by accolades for being so responsible. Every compliment stings, pretty much a sticky note on an already overloaded emotional baggage. Wow, you're so mature, they say, and you nod, but inside, you yearn to toss aside the caregiver title and frolic into carefree oblivion for just a moment. You start feeling like the world's emotional sponge, absorbing everyone else's pain while your own gets bottled up tighter than a soda can shaken before the grand explosion. It's a lot to carry, and sometimes it's all too exhausting, leaving you confused about what real love and peace even look like. You become a ninja of sorts, a master in reading the room for threat levels, emotional danger, a disapproving glance, the discomfort of silence. Calmness isn't your natural habitat. It's a state you must actively manage and maintain. In a strange twist, little by little, you begin to confuse tranquility with safety and self-control with self-worth. Your childhood spaces became chaos, so you tucked yourself away, minimizing your needs in the pursuit of peace, even if it meant shrinking into a softer, quieter version of yourself. All those years watching others crumble without learning it's okay to express a good old-fashioned meltdown, it ingrains a survival blueprint on your psyche. You adapt by donning a mask of I'm fine even when your heart is flailing about like a fish out of water. As an adult, those patterns cling on, like an obnoxious party guest refusing to leave. There's a tiny sense of unease when you're with others. You might find yourself explaining things to the nth degree, saying sorry for simply existing, or feeling the need to overachieve just to feel somewhat worthy. It doesn't help that rest feels like a luxury you can't afford. As if your body is caught in a hypervigilant state, your brain blurs the lines between peaceful stillness and imminent disaster, maintaining a tension that you can't seem to shake off. And then, drawn like a moth to a flame, you find yourself gravitating toward those in distress, mirroring your own past, a role you know all too well, one that feels comforting if not downright exhausting. Because, after all, saving others is what you've been practicing your whole life. There's a peculiar satisfaction in feeling useful, isn't there? It's as if you've finally found your place in this chaotic world, like a puzzle piece fitting snugly into its spot. But peel back those layers, and you might discover that it's more of an encore performance from childhood, a caretaker tending to everyone else's emotions while secretly longing for a dose of TLC yourself. The irony, you seldom allow others to take charge of your well-being. The thought of depending on someone else, oh, that's a recipe for discomfort. Love feels like a comfy sweater when you're the one doling it out, but itchy when it's your turn to accept it. Receiving love requires a leap of faith, a trust that you've hoarded like treasure after all. It's not something to toss around lightly. Hence, the paradox of happiness. Even in laughter, a little voice whispers guilt, urging you to restrain that joy. As if you're standing on a precarious tightrope, waiting for it to snap. Celebrating the small wins should feel like a parade, yet somehow, it exists in a half-hearted limbo, doesn't it? It's like being gifted a cupcake but holding on to the belief that it might get snatched away before you can take a bite. You've grown up with a default setting where happiness is fleeting and security is a trophy you earn, not a given. And let's not even get started on that loneliness that lurks in the shadows. It's not the type that vanishes with a night out or a chat with friends. It cuts deeper, haunting you even in crowded rooms. You've built walls of emotional self-sufficiency so strong, it's almost like a fortress. Sure, you're surrounded, yet somehow you're the solitary lighthouse keeper, standing vigilant while others mingle freely. How on earth do you explain that you became a grown-up way too soon, tending to responsibilities before you even learned to dance in circles? Some nights, it hits harder, the longing for that carefree little kid inside. The one who could shed tears without a second thought, just being gloriously imperfect. That child still flickers within, waiting to break free from the adult's relentless routines. Sure, you've blossomed and patched up wounds, but the remnants of those early heartaches linger like a stubborn aftertaste. They seep into every relationship, coloring your quest for perfection and fueling the anxiety that buzzes like a persistent fly. You're not chasing praise. What you genuinely seek is safety, the sweet relief of finally being able to exhale without worrying about what comes next. Growing up too fast. Oh, it's like losing more than just your childhood. You're shedding the liberty of being flawed, wherein every misstep feels like a catastrophic failure. Each disappointment echoes through the years, a reminder of that little one who felt the weight of the world. And here's the kicker. People only see the polished exteriors, the strength that radiates from you, completely blind to the immense toll it takes to maintain that facade of composure. They clap for your independence, but little do they know it emerged from necessity, not choice. Sure, you're the survivor in this saga, excelling at dysfunction over real life, and when adulthood unfolds, you realize you're missing a vibrant spark, a dash of spontaneity, a childlike wonder that feels like a distant memory. You catch glimpses of others experiencing joy, and it's like watching a magic trick unfold. It seems so effortless for them. You vastly underestimated the difference between maturity and hypervigilance. Thinking strength was a badge of honor instead of recognizing it as a shield against vulnerability. Understanding the effects of childhood trauma is like peeling an onion. Each layer reveals more tears. When you grow up too fast, it's not because you're reaching for your adult license before the legal age. Nah, it's because you're adapting to a world where love is as predictable as a cat's mood. You become this supercharged empath, sensing everyone's feelings, while your own emotions swirl in the background like a ghost at a party. This is where the danger of parentification waltzes in, often without any fanfare. Picture this, a child stepping up to fill grown-up shoes, managing a household like a tiny CEO. Sure, they might wear rainbow socks and pajama bottoms, but they carry the weight of responsibility like a superhero with a cape made of stress, and deep down, they silently vow, if I don't keep everything running smoothly, the wheels will fly off the bus. That belief becomes the scaffolding of their world, crafting an adult mind with a child's heart still trapped inside an uninvited but persistent guest. With this child-sized perspective, the nervous system is like a fire alarm that never stops ringing. Constant anticipation of chaos turns their world into a game of emotional chess, where they're always a step ahead. Small disturbances become monumental, and it's almost like they've got a sixth sense for brewing storms. Trust in adults goes kaput, and every tiny upset sends them into a tailspin of self-imposed responsibility. It's mature on the outside, but inside, it's a fear-driven roller coaster that never seems to end. Our brains wire themselves based on early experiences, and that means the overachieving inner child learns that calm moments can be as rare as finding a unicorn, with the amygdala running the show like a drama queen, and the prefrontal cortex on hyperdrive. Adults who grew up quickly often find themselves tangled in anxiety, a crafting of survival that gets a little messy when it's time to relax. Yes, comfort may as well come with a hefty price tag. These adults are often caught in the web of confusion between worthiness and usefulness. If you've ever felt that sinking feeling of not being enough until you've checked off every box on a never-ending to-do list, you're not alone. They've learned to equate love with performance, believing that their value hinges on how well they hustle. It's like living in a never-ending job interview where the stakes keep climbing, and the performance reviews are all internal. Yet, somewhere beneath the layers lies that forgotten child, yearning for a reunion. They don't care about perfection or taking back the clock. What they truly crave is the playful joy, the silly laughter, and the acceptance that love can simply be given no strings attached. The real adventure lies in remembering how to reconnect with that innocent spirit, to reclaim the right to feel joyfully careless, and to drop the weight of responsible armor for good. Because let's face it, we all deserve a healthy dose of silliness. When children receive love through acts of service, they start to associate their worth with how useful they are. This creates a narrative in their minds that says, "I'm only valuable when I help." Unfortunately, this belief doesn't just pack its bags and leave when they grow up. Instead, it matures and morphs into adult behaviors. You might spot it in that buddy who listens intently but shares next to nothing, or the overworked employee desperate to please their boss. It's a pattern that shapes their adult lives, where the fear of losing love chills the idea of stepping out of their usefulness. Now let's dive into the emotional gym workout these kids endured. Imagine being told that your feelings were too much to handle or witnessing emotions create chaos. Over time, they learn to lock those feelings up in a vault with emotional inhibition as their trusted security guard. Anger got tangled up with guilt, sadness faded into a numb fog, and even joyous moments were shrouded in fear because who wants to draw attention? This relentless flattening of feelings became a well-practiced routine that left them feeling emotionally detached in adulthood. They can eloquently talk about their feelings but rarely touch the rawness of them. And here's where attachment comes into play. If the love they received in childhood was a game of hot and cold, sometimes warm, but often leaving them shivering in the cold, they developed what's known as anxious attachment. Imagine constantly peering around corners, looking for signs of withdrawal or disappointment, shuddering at the thought of ever being let down. It's not paranoia, but rather a well-practiced survival skill. As adults, they drift between clinging to others and pushing them away, craving closeness while fearing the chains of dependency. Inside every adult who carried childhood burdens too early are two battleground generals, the mature protector and the forgotten child. The protector is pragmatic, managing life and its responsibilities like a pro, but the child inside is stuck, waiting for a safe moment to just be. This conflict spurs a tug-of-war where the protector sometimes holds the reins far too long, leading to burnout, a state where even joy feels like a chore. Life becomes a series of tasks rather than a joy to experience. But here's the silver lining. While these behaviors were birthed from struggles, they also showcase the tremendous resilience of these individuals. The kid who had to grow up too soon wasn't just coping, they thrived despite the odds. Their enhanced empathy and self-awareness become superpowers, albeit tricky ones. They never learned how to switch them off, and that lack of an off switch can lead to exhaustion, as they bear the weight of their protector without giving the child a chance to breathe and play. Now, when they finally step into adulthood, a phenomenon known as delayed adolescence often rears its head. This isn't about childish antics but rather emotional awakening. They might feel an intense longing for freedom, play, and exploration, like kids breaking free after a long confinement. The craving for those once lost experiences bubbles up, triggering rebellion against the structure and perfection they adhered to for so long. This is not regression, it's a bold and brave attempt at reclaiming what was unfairly snatched away. And with this newfound awakening, they embark on a journey of recovery, piecing together the joyous fragments of their lost childhood. It's a wild ride that blends chaos with discovery, shaping their adult lives in ways they never deemed possible. So, while these adults may have faced hurdles set by their past, their awakening is proof that lost playfulness can indeed be found, igniting sparks of joy that had long been buried. It's not just about managing life anymore, it's about living it fully. Navigating the treacherous waters of identity can be a roller coaster, especially when your entire sense of self was molded around filling the needs of others. It's like being a chameleon in a world where suddenly no one is asking you to change colors. The stillness can feel downright ominous, like it's got this eerie voice asking, "Hey, who are you, really?" when you're not fixing or managing. For those who sprinted into adulthood, that question becomes both a puzzle and a midlife crisis rolled into one. Among the chaos of self-doubt, there's an unexpected silver lining. Those who took on burdens early often develop remarkable qualities. Think of them as the emotional superheroes. With skills to read feelings as if they were in a foreign language, they can sense pain and loneliness, enabling them to create safe havens for others. Even if they themselves have never truly basked in that safety, it's a beautiful mess. The kind that comes with empathy and insight, but also at a hefty price. The irony is that these supercharged individuals often face the dilemma of glaring losses. They exchange the blissful ignorance of childhood for a sense that they always have to earn their spot in someone's heart. The freedom to be carefree slips away, leaving behind a hefty emotional bill. These aren't trivial losses, but rather complex cracks in the foundation that shape how they relate to the whole wide world around them. And then, as if scripted in a drama, reality hits like a ton of bricks when they finally sit in therapy, or during a heart-to-heart over coffee. The mind does a small flicker of realization. Oh, I wasn't meant to carry all that weight. This is the catalyst for healing, ushering in a wave of acknowledgement that what you perceived as strength was often just a defense mechanism. Suddenly, the concepts of independence and loneliness materialize in their stark vulnerability, begging to be explored. Now, the fascinating thing about the human psyche is its ability to morph pain into power. What once was merely survival can shift into a liberating transformation. The skills that once kept you bolted down can now be wielded as tools for freedom. It's like upgrading your old survival kit into this dazzling toolbox for thriving. Peace becomes the ultimate goal, which is ironic for those who spent so long thinking they had to fight for it. Yet, there's a specific kind of sorrow that dances silently alongside those who matured too fast. It isn't the loud crying kind, it's the quiet coffee-sipping kind in the dead of night, rhythmically sighing as the weight of years of being the strong one looms overhead. They realize, with a sudden pang, that childhood was meant for playing, not preparing for life's cage match. Seeking help became a foreign concept whilst bossing around other kids on how to cope was second nature. Now, as adults, they spin in emotional hamster wheels. Rest feels like a luxury no one can afford, and the act of crying, well, that's been relegated to the impractical corner of the brain. They crave love as if it were a rare dessert, but then go and serve it a cold shoulder when it approaches, riddled with endless questions and self-doubt. They overthink every encounter as if scanning with a magnifying glass for signs of rejection. Deep inside, the belief lingers that if they just perform marvelously, maybe they won't have to face the heartache of loss again. Ultimately, the wound of early responsibility transforms soulful children into caretaker adults who oftentimes feel like ghosts in their own lives, drifting through a reality they had no intention of creating. It's a bittersweet irony that echoes through their experiences. Many might not even realize they're still shackled by the very rules they established back in their childhood. Rules once served as sturdy shields, but with time, they've transformed into restrictive cages. A child who had to grow up too quickly becomes an adult struggling to embrace love. To them, love isn't a warm embrace, it's a demanding performance they feel they have to earn. Relationships often feel like a spectator sport. They're present but distanced, as if they're living life through a foggy glass, detached and hesitant. Whenever they muster the courage to trust, it's like balancing a fragile glass tower, one small tremor, and it all comes crashing down. The gnawing dread that stability can evaporate in an instant creeps in. Growing up too fast isn't just a loss of childhood, it's an erasure of safety, the very bedrock on which emotional freedom is built. With safety missing, they tumble into survival mode, efficient but anything but peaceful. In survival mode, one can appear composed on the surface, possibly even successful. Yet inside lies an unspeakable fatigue. No amount of sleep can shake off the weariness of being alert at all times, of soliciting emotional upkeep for both oneself and others. Healing doesn't mean metamorphosing into someone entirely new. It's about rediscovering the person you were before life demanded quick maturity, that fearless dreamer, that uninhibited laugher, and that hopeful believers are patiently waiting beneath the weight of adult responsibilities. The journey of healing revolves around unlearning the deeply ingrained habit of self-abandonment. It's granting yourself permission to feel small again, permission to rest, need, cry, or even admit you don't have all the answers. Oddly enough, for those who are rushed into adulthood, softness can feel like an alien concept. vulnerability strikes fear into the heart. As past experiences taught that showing weakness would only lead to pain and isolation. However, healing starts when you kindle the courage to recognize that it's safe now. You're not bound to the same old environment or people, nor are you enmeshed in the silence of childhood. The adult you is capable of creating a new reality, one where you're free from the exhausting roles of parent, protector, or peacekeeper. It's a world where the simple act of saying, "I'm tired and that's okay," becomes a refreshing declaration. Grief comes hand in hand with healing, a silent confidence that acknowledges the childhood you wished for but never had. It's not just venting sadness for what was lost, but also for the version of you that had to masquerade as older and wiser. You'll mourn the joyous moments that slipped past because you were too busy maintaining the emotional balance of your life, reclaiming the joyful innocence destiny robbed from you. A transformative shift occurs when those who bore the weight of adult burdens start engaging with their inner child. They begin to inquire, "What did you need back then?" Sometimes these long-buried requests are painfully simple: the need for validation, the yearning for someone to stay, the desire to truly be seen. Recognizing these needs paves the way for self-compassion, enabling you to wrap your younger self in empathy rather than critique. Healing becomes an act of nurturing your most authentic self back to life. The irony of life is delightful, if not a little twisted. The very strength that helped you battle through the chaos now serves as your healing wand. You've endured so much, and through that pain, you cultivated empathy and emotional depth. But now, it's about shifting gears, not just surviving, but actually living. Living is messy. It's about embracing imperfections, resting amidst unfinished business, and savoring each moment without that pesky guilt clawing at your heart. And let's talk about letting people in. For too long, you might have felt like a burden. But here's the scoop: asking for help doesn't make you weak. It's a signal that you're ready to reclaim joy, finding happiness in the silliest of things. Your inner child has been missing out on joy without a purpose. Imagine laughing just because, not because you're putting on a show. Who knew that growing up could be so liberating? You might think that maturing too fast stunted your growth. Right, wrong. It gave you unique superpowers to decode emotions like a maestro reading a symphony. You grew sharp instincts to sense underlying emotions and love passionately. But here's the catch: those gifts now need balance. You don't have to carry everyone's burdens. You can set down that self-imposed title of everyone's healer and simply be yourself. Let's be real, healing doesn't mean you'll never revisit those old aches. On particularly lonely days, you might still feel the urge to put on that armor again. But the game has changed. You now have the choice to sit with yourself, whispering, "It's okay. I can take a break from being strong." That's the essence of true maturity. It's soft, it's gentle, and it grows from awareness rather than force. The child who once rushed through life is still in you, waiting for the moment they can just be. Instead of running, they'll learn to walk alongside you, no longer glancing toward a door for elusive saviors. Because guess what? You've become the one who shows up, a remarkable feat in itself. Healing is not about altering history but reshaping its meaning. It's about strolling beside that younger self instead of sprinting far away. As you shed the weight of your armor, you'll find new spaces to breathe and live unapologetically. Sure, the world might remain oblivious to your struggles, but you'll hold those experiences close. That beautiful recognition that you've persevered, that you're still here, learning to embrace softness again, is downright magical. It's a reminder that, even after being thrust into adulthood too soon, there's always room to grow again, this time in a vibrant, colorful way of your own choosing. So let's be clear, healing doesn't equate to achieving Herculean strength. Oh no, my friend, you've always been strong. Healing is embracing gentleness and safety, allowing yourself to be your true self. And here's the biggest revelation: perhaps growing up was never just about facing responsibilities. Maybe it was always about learning to dance with joy, love, and authenticity all along.